Welcome to our training session on identifying speech, language and communication difficulties, and also we'll be talking about some interventions and an overview of some ways that you can support children who've got speech, language and communication difficulties. My name's Helen Malik and I'm a speech and language therapist, and I work together with Sian Rees, another speech therapist, and we work as part of the All Talk project in Waltham Forest. So what are the aims of our training session today? We're going to be giving you some information about the impact of speech, language and communication difficulties, to highlight the importance of early identification. And we're going to consider the importance of adult-child interaction and how that can influence children's skill development. And we're also going to encourage you to reflect on your own interaction strategies and think of some positive interaction strategies and interventions and things that you can take back and use in your setting to support children in developing their speech, language and communication skills. Okay, so what does research tell us about speech, language and communication development? So we know that there is a close link and an impact on children's learning and social, emotional development and behaviour. So children who have difficulties with communication language, we know that that affects the way they understand language, their ability to be able to communicate, the size of their vocabulary, whether they can put sentences together, being able to have conversations with other people. So that includes a wide range of different skills. And obviously, if children have difficulties in any of those areas, there's a higher chance that that's going to affect other areas of their development as well. So around 7% of children have a speech and language difficulty that needs long-term support. So going into primary school and secondary school, 7% of children are going to continue to need some support with their difficulties. So that's approximately 2 to 3 children in every classroom will have a significant communication difficulty. And also in some areas of the country, so particularly more deprived areas, we know that there's a higher number of children, so up to 50% of children starting school, research has shown, have some delays in their speech and language skills. And some of those difficulties are more what we would call kind of transient language difficulties. So skills that will develop with some early identification and lots of support and extra stimulation and advice for families to do at home. So with that support, lots of those children will be able to catch up and improve on their language skills. And we also know that research has found that this concept of the missing children. So we know that lots of children, when some research was carried out looking at the number of children that were being identified, particularly in primary schools, we know that some of that research found that lots of children are being missed. So lots of children's needs are not being identified. Okay, so thinking a bit more about the longer term impact. So we know that there's research that shows that people who have poor vocabulary have significantly, that affects their life chances later on in life. So there's some research that's found that children and young adults and also adults as well that have poor vocabulary are twice as likely to be unemployed. There's also a high prevalence of speech, language and communication difficulties amongst young offenders. So research that's been done looking at the prison population and younger people that are known to youth offending services have found that lots of those people have got difficulties with their language and communication skills. And other research has found that 81% of children with social, emotional and mental health needs also have an underlying communication difficulty. So it's quite high levels and high sort of links between lots of other areas of development. And we've put a reference here to the Communication Trust, which has a document which has got lots of sort of recent research if anybody wants to find out more. Okay. So thinking about what makes a difference in early years settings. So what do we know from research? What does research tell us about good things that we should be doing in our settings to promote communication and language skills? So early identification, we've talked a bit about that. So we know that the sooner children's needs are identified and support and intervention is put into place, the sooner that happens, the better the outcomes are for children. Creating a language-rich environment. So we know that it's important to think about giving opportunities for children to communicate in your setting. So thinking about the kind of activities and resources that you're providing, and are they fun and interesting? Are they giving children opportunities to communicate? Are there fun things to talk about? Thinking about having a cosy space, book corners, things like that that are important to provide that language-rich environment. Also making sure that there's time for adult-child interaction. So are the practitioners in your setting engaging with children in a positive way? Are they using particular strategies that we know are the best things to be doing to support language and communication skills? And is there time for that peer-to-peer interaction as well, where staff can support each other to reflect and develop their own skills in terms of interaction? So really valuing that as a high kind of key priority within your setting as well, and the leaders in your setting really supporting the rest of your team to develop all of those strategies around the way that they interact and respond and engage with the children. Also, we know it's really important to share information with parents as well. So making sure that parents understand the importance of communication language, and they know some things that they can be doing at home to support their child's skills. So we know that that's another area within the early years which is really important. Okay, so we've got our language pyramid here that we're not going to go into a lot of detail. Usually we show it in most of our training sessions, but it's useful to think about when we're supporting children who've got difficulties with their communication language. It's really important to think about what difficulties does the child have, because often we might notice that the child isn't talking, or they're not saying any words, or their speech is unclear. But actually, when we observe the child in a bit more detail and spend, over a period of time, spend some time gathering information about the child, we might notice that they've got some difficulties in other areas of their communication language. So we want to be thinking about their attention listening, their play and their social interaction skills, their understanding of language, so following instructions and information that's given to them, and then their talking as well, so how many words they use, are they putting words together, are they using sentences, are they able to have a conversation? And then lastly at the top is the speech sounds, so the clarity of the words that they're saying. So first we want to think about what difficulties is the child having. Is it with their attention listening? So then that will help us to focus on that particular area. Is it with their understanding of language? So this will help us to work out what support we need to put into place for them. And quite often in the early years, children will have difficulties in more than one of these areas, but it's really helpful when we're planning our intervention and thinking about what we want to support children with to help. It's really important to think about making sure that we're targeting the right areas of difficulty. Okay, so some information first of all about a bit more about interaction, because we know that research shows us that this is really important way of supporting children's language skills. So what kind of strategies should we be using to support children's speech, language and communication development. So things like following the child's lead. So we talk about observing the child, waiting and listening to them. So really before we jump in with our language and we jump in with our questions, often in our head we have an idea of a really great activity that we might want to do or something that we want to ask the child, but actually the child is interested in something else. And so it's really important that we spend time first observing and seeing what it is that they're doing at that moment. What are they looking at? What are they interested in? And then making sure that any language that we use or comments that we make are really linked to what the child is looking at that time. So trying to be face to face with the child as well. So thinking about our positioning. Are we standing up over the child or are we getting down to the child's level? Sometimes that might mean sitting on the floor as well, just because then we know that being face to face with the child makes that communication much easier. Imitating, so copying what they say, copying noises that they make, copying words, and also copying their play as well. So joining in with what they're doing by copying them. Repeating words and phrases, so we know that's really important to encourage children to keep on using more language by repeating what they've said. And it also shows children that we're interested in what it is that they're talking about if we repeat after them. Slowing down our rate of speech as well. So sometimes we can, if we talk quite fast, it can be difficult for children to understand and keep up with what we're saying. So all children need longer to process language, but children who've got difficulties need even longer. So really thinking about your rate of talking and trying to slow that down and often giving extra time as well and using some silence, so having some pauses. Giving reasons to communicate. So for some children where it's more difficult to encourage them to communicate, we might do things like sabotaging the activity. So putting maybe things inside a box or in a bag or on a shelf, so that they have to come and ask us in some way for, whatever it is that they want. Also offering choices, that's another way to kind of give a reason for them to communicate. Interpreting or commenting, so thinking about rather than questioning. So often it's tempting to use, we know that questioning can be really useful to support children's thinking and learning, but we want to try to avoid some of those testing questions that sometimes we can slip into the habit of using. So things like, what shape is it? What colour is it? What's that? What's that? Where's it gone? What's happened? If children don't have very much language, sometimes you'll find that they just tend to ignore you. And also sometimes we already know the answer to those questions. We just want to hear them say the words, but actually that's not very helpful for supporting language development because children need us to hear, they need to hear the language linked to those activities and objects that they're interested in. So it's really important to comment on what they're doing rather than questioning. Okay, so that's that one. Okay, so now we've got some information about running small group sessions. So small groups can be a really useful way to carry out a bit more of a focused approach to supporting language and communication skills. So particularly things like developing attention listening and some games where you might be doing things like turn taking and encouraging children to initiate and wait for their turn, and some sort of language-based activities. So some things just to think about if you are going to run any small groups in your setting. So thinking about keeping it short. So often children find it difficult to sit and focus for long periods. So anything that you're doing, you want to keep it quite short. You want to keep it fun and interesting and engaging, because we know that often if children start to lose focus, you can kind of slip into that habit of spending the whole time telling the children to, sit down, or you need to listen, you need to wait. Whereas actually it could be that they're just losing interest because it's a bit boring. So thinking about the activities that you're using try and incorporate something that's a bit more active as well. So maybe when they have to stand up and jump around, playing with the parachute, that's always a fun one. So just some things to think about, and keeping groups small as well, because often if you have a bigger group, it means that children have to wait longer for their turn. If you're, passing something round and taking a turn during an activity, if there's lots of children, they're going to have to wait a long time, which we know is going to be really difficult for children. So that's something just to think about as well. And I guess it's thinking about, why are you doing the small group activity? What is it that you want to be focusing on? And if you are going to be doing it, then thinking about making it, really fun and inclusive and interesting, because otherwise, if children are not engaged and involved in the session, then they're not going to be picking up their any of the language or the skills that you want them to be learning. Okay. So it's just kind of like a little suggested structure. So you might have like a hello song. So it can be useful to have the same structure every session. So then children start to become familiar with what it is that you're doing. You may want to use like a particular corner in the room if you're setting, or another smaller room where it's quieter so children are not so distracted. And you might want to, start with a bit of a hello song. Then we would suggest having 2 kind of main activities and then a goodbye song. So something quite short, and 2 kind of fun activities that children are going to want to kind of join in and take turns with. Obviously, when you're running your group as well, you want to be thinking about those adult-child interaction strategies, so you can still be using those kind of approaches within your small group activities. Okay, so we've got some information here also about using visual support. So we know that using visual support to support language can be a really helpful strategy. And there's lots of different types of visual support. So we have a diagram here that shows the easiest type of visual support for children to understand is using the object, so using a real object to represent a word or an activity. And then you would have gestures, and then photos, and then a drawing, and then the spoken word. So we know that spoken words can be quite abstract, and once you've said the word has disappeared. So if you can use some kind of visual support to support that word, it makes the language and the word a lot more concrete, and it's much more visual and easier for children to understand. So there's a few examples of different types of visual support. So I'm sure that you've all come across things like flashcards, or you might have little cards with pictures of things that you want the child to do. So the toilet, if you're working on toilet training, or snack time, you might have a picture of the bowl or the table where you do the snack time. So that can be really helpful to help children understand what's going to be happening or what it is that you want them to be doing. There's also a picture here of a timetable, so you might use several different photos to make up a timetable, a schedule of what's going to be happening during the day, and sound timers as well. So that's another kind of different type of visual support that you can use to help children understand things like waiting, how long they have to wait till maybe they can get a turn on the bike, or how long they need to wait until the activity is going to finish. So you can use it for lots of different things. Okay, so we've come to the end of the session now. So we just want you to think about your setting and your practice, and think about what's working well in your setting. So in terms of supporting children's communication and language, think about something that you think you're doing really well, and think about something that you feel you could maybe change or do more of. So it may be a specific strategy that we've mentioned, or it may be, using some visual support or particular intervention that we've talked about, something that you think you'd like to do more of. And think about something that you're going to do differently, or something that you're going to change after the session today. Okay, so thank you very much for listening to our session. We've included some links at the end to some other useful websites if you want some more information about speech speech, language and communication skills, and also some information about how to contact us. We've also got a Facebook page, so if you're on Facebook you can have a look on there for some different ideas and information that we're always sharing. And also we have a page on Waltham Forest Hub as well, with lots of different resources that we've developed through the course of our project, and some learning videos and top tips. So have a look on there for some more information. Thank you.